Right now, a historic decision. Russia is in shock. NATO is expanding. A new war is looming. Belarus in the crosshairs. Putin's drones are already over Minsk. The Kremlin is playing with fire. A Russian ship in NATO waters. Shock! Salsk is burning. A massive fire after a hellish drone raid. Another disgrace for Russia. For the first time in history, the Navy parade is cancelled. What is the Kremlin so afraid of? Sensation! Trump's new ultimatum. Putin is on the clock. Washington is no longer playing diplomacy. Trump pushes the button, the Kremlin is in a panic. The Pentagon is packing its bags. The US is shutting down military bases in Europe. What will happen to NATO? Moscow in Beijing's grip. Troops in exchange for technology. All this and more in our program Hotspot. A historic turn. Austria joins NATO. The Kremlin is in a panic. Europe is changing before our eyes. Neutrality is over. Austria is building up its army. Putin is feeling the heat.
Putin has repeatedly criticized NATO expansion, viewing it as a threat to Russia's security, and then launched a full-scale offensive against Ukraine. Europe understands that the only thing to expect from the Kremlin dictator is war, so it is planning its strategy in advance. The Austrian authorities are ready to discuss the possibility of abandoning the country's neutral status and joining NATO due to the threat from the Kremlin. Austria's foreign minister stated that she is open to public debates about Austria joining NATO, but neither the parliament nor Austria as a whole currently supports joining the alliance.
One thing is clear: neutrality by itself does not protect us. What truly protects Austria in an increasingly unstable international environment and with a more aggressive Russia is investment in our own defense capabilities as well as in partnerships. Overall, I am very open to starting a public discussion about Austria's future in the field of security and defense. Although there is currently no majority in parliament or among the population in favor of joining NATO, such a discussion could be very useful.
Piet believes that Vienna cannot just sit back and wait, because the world has changed.
We cannot simply lean back in our chairs and say, if we don't bother anyone, no one will bother us. That would be naive. We are doing everything possible to support the common European security and defense policy financially, through military participation and politically. Thus, Austria's neutrality has changed significantly since joining the EU in 1995.
Austria declared its neutrality back in 1955 after the withdrawal of Allied troops. Austria's neutral status was enshrined in the country's constitution. Therefore, to change this status, it would be necessary to amend the constitution. But it is possible. Neutral Austria could consider joining NATO if Slovakia leaves the North Atlantic Alliance, something the pro-Russian Prime Minister Fico has already started talking about.
If Slovakia were to leave NATO, it would worsen the security situation for Austria. This would undoubtedly spark a major discussion about Austria's NATO membership and the possibility of joining NATO. One of the reasons people say Austria is not currently under immediate threat is because it is surrounded by NATO member countries and is therefore relatively safe.
Austria is almost completely surrounded by NATO member countries, and in the event of an attack from the east, the country expects that Russia would first have to go through Slovakia, which is in NATO. Despite its neutrality, Austria cooperates with NATO through the Partnership for Peace program. But it is not Russia that wants peace, and if Putin were truly interested in peace, he would have started negotiations for a ceasefire.
US President Trump handed over Crimea and several eastern regions of Ukraine to Putin, so to speak, on a silver platter. In addition, he ruled out the possibility of Ukraine joining NATO. And what does Putin do? He continues to wage a war of annihilation across the entire country.
The Russian Foreign Ministry has repeatedly accused Austria of violating its neutrality.
The Austrian leadership can insist to itself and to the world as much as it wants on the inviolability of the country's permanent neutrality, which in the past truly earned it the reputation of a respected international mediator in resolving peaceful crises. But today, it is clear to any reasonable politician that the concepts of Austrian neutrality are incompatible.
The last time was on the 24th of July, when the spokesperson for the Russian Foreign Ministry, Maria Zakharova, stated that Western weapons were being transported to Ukraine through Austrian territory.
By the Austrian authorities, both in letter and in spirit of their own constitution, the constitutional law on permanent neutrality of 1955 From the standpoint of common sense, combining a genuinely not merely nominal neutral status with the implementation of military transit on such a scale in any form is simply impossible. But that's from the perspective of common sense, and there seems to be less and less of it left in Western countries' Austrian political circles, apparently, are guided by something other than common sense. They manipulate things in their own interests, and in reality act against the interests of the Austrian people and not only violating the norms of constitutional law, but also disregarding the opinion of their own country's population. After all, more than 75% of citizens there support maintaining neutrality in its classic sense.
A similar opinion was expressed by the ambassador of the Russian Federation in Vienna, Dmitry Lyubinsky. He stated that Austria's neutrality is becoming a political fiction due to the country's participation in the pan-European air defense system Sky Shield.
The Austrian authorities claim that participation in the Sky Shield program guarantees security for the Austrian people and does not violate Austria's neutrality. From our point of view, this is a rather questionable way to protect sovereignty when Austria's military neutrality becomes a political fiction. And of course, we have drawn our own conclusions.
The journalist who interviewed Mein Reisinger called neutrality the sacred cow of Austrians and a part of the identity of Austria's residents.
But we need to take our own security into our own hands, and Austria will make its contribution within the framework of neutrality. We will also increase our defense spending and thus contribute to European security.
Just a year ago, 4 neutral countries in Europe declared that they wanted to move closer to NATO through joint exercises and information sharing because of Russia's aggression. And they stated that this initiative has already begun to be implemented. Several high-level meetings were scheduled. At the same time, it was stated that Austria joining NATO is out of the question. Trump rules out the possibility of Ukraine joining NATO. He suggested, echoing Kremlin rhetoric, that Ukraine's intentions to join the alliance could have been the reason for the Russian invasion.
At the summit in Washington, we decided that Ukraine's path to NATO is irreversible. But Ukraine was never promised that NATO membership would be part of a peace agreement.
Would Russia have acted this way toward Ukraine if an agreement had been signed earlier? Currently, NATO has 32 member countries. Some countries did not wait for an attack but reconsidered their NATO accession policy immediately after Putin's invasion of Ukraine in 2022. These are Finland and Sweden. They joined this defense alliance, which clearly makes them more protected from Putin's invasion.
Shock! Putin bombs Minsk. Lukashenko on the brink of war. The Kremlin goes all in. A Russian ship in EU waters. A bloody attack in Zaporizhzhia. 17 dead in the colony on the anniversary of Olenivka. Salsk in flames. The Kremlin in panic. All the shocking details coming up in the report.
On the third anniversary of the military terrorist attack in Olenivka, Russian occupiers committed an equally horrific crime, carrying out an airstrike on the Belenkovskaya correctional colony in the Zaporizhzhia region during the night of the 28th of July to 29. As a result of this war crime, 17 people were killed and 83 more were injured. Civilian infrastructure was also destroyed and damaged.
Strikes on correctional colonies are officially considered war crimes. They are prohibited under those international documents that have been ratified, including by the Russian Federation. In my opinion, this was a deliberate strike on the correctional colony, timed to coincide with the anniversary of the Olenivka terrorist attack. We can say that this was a demonstrative episode of war crimes by the Russian Federation, and it was primarily addressed to Ukraine's Western partners.
There were also strikes on Russia that night. On the night of the 29th of July, the city of Salsk in the Rostov region was attacked by drones. Local residents reported a large fire near the railway infrastructure.
As a result, this effectively eliminates the possibility of redeploying personnel, heavy armored vehicles, and fuel and lubricants by rail transport.
Unknown drones were detected in temporarily occupied Donetsk. Local social media channels report dozens of UAVs. It is possible that a railway junction was attacked. A substation on the outskirts of Makivka was also on fire. This year, 2 out of the 5 divisions that the Russian dictator has dreamed of creating since December 2022 will see the light of day. According to Putin, this will significantly increase the strike power and combat capabilities of the fleet, which are already being targeted by GUR fighters. They showed footage of an FPV drone being used in open sea. But what the Russian fleet is really capable of is provoking incidents on the territory of other countries. The main headquarters of Estonia's defense forces stated that the Russian border guard ship entered the country's territorial waters without permission and remained there for 35 minutes. The incident occurred on the 26th of July.
The point is that, according to Estonia's State Border Act, a foreign military vessel is allowed to pass through the country's territorial waters if it is making an innocent passage. But there is one condition. To do so, it is necessary to notify Estonia's Ministry of Foreign Affairs 48 hours in advance. The Russian border guard ship did not do this, which indicates a demonstrative attempt by the Russian Federation to violate the territorial waters of this state.
The Russian occupation army does not cease its attempts to capture the cities of Pokrovsk and Mirnorad. However, they are objectively slowing down after encountering a worthy response from the Ukrainian armed forces.
The occupiers are trying to use the so-called small cauldrons tactic, meaning flanking maneuvers against the positions of the Ukrainian defense forces with the threat of creating an operational encirclement. The goal is to force the Ukrainian defense forces units out of their positions in Pokrovsk and accordingly in Mirnorad and Drushkivka. Currently, Russian troops have intensified their offensive along the flanks. First and foremost, this refers to the penetration of Russian troops between Pokrovsk and Kostiantynivka, with the main direction of movement toward Mirnorad.
Things are not calm even in Putin-friendly Belarus. There, a drone was shot down right over the capital Minsk. After the incident, the Belarusian regime announced that it is taking measures to strengthen control over its airspace. Meanwhile, Kim Jong-un has volunteered to help Putin continue the war. The North Korean dictator may send additional troops to Russia as early as August this year. In exchange for strengthening the Russian army, North Korea is receiving satellite launch and missile guidance technologies from Moscow.
This has never happened before. Putin has cancelled the parade. Are the sailors left without a celebration? Oh, what happened? The reason will surprise you. Shocking! Putin has resurrected and made a public appearance. Watch all the details right now.
Heartfelt congratulations to all Russian naval servicemen on this significant Navy Day.
For the first time in Russia since 2017, the main Navy parade for Navy Day was held. Ships arrived from other regions and even from other countries. But here's the problem: for the first time in 2025, the Grand Parade was unexpectedly cancelled.
Every year on Navy Day, which is traditionally celebrated on the last Sunday of July, there were always impressive ships proudly displayed on the Never River, and it was always a truly grand and festive celebration. Actually, I can't truthfully say that it was some kind of truly super-duper grand parade, but it was most definitely a significant celebration. There were numerous flags waving proudly. There was an impressive parade where the esteemed commander would meticulously inspect all the ships and so on and so forth. So for the historic city of St. Petersburg, it was always a very special and cherished holiday.
Of course, there were also congratulations from the Kremlin dictator. He even explained the reason for the cancellation.
It's a truly beautiful and significant holiday, but I think you certainly agree with me that under the current challenging circumstances, it is absolutely right and proper to celebrate this important holiday in a dedicated combat working environment. Everyone must diligently stay at their assigned posts.
So why is that? After all, Russia started its full-scale war against Ukraine back in 2022. But for some reason, everyone stays at their posts only started in 2025.
As the Kremlin likes to do, they simply took this holiday and restructured it, reformatting it for Putin. Previously, it was just a naval holiday for the city and for sailors, but now Putin has taken it over. Well, besides, St. Petersburg is, of course, an important city for Putin because he was born there. That's basically why they decided to reformat it.
Peskov also announced the reason for the cancellation. Supposedly, it's all for security reasons. But the parade was not held either in St. Petersburg or in other cities. Vladivostok, Kaliningrad, and the occupied Sevastopol.
Let's get back to the real reason. And the real reason is that on Sunday morning, for the first time, residents of St. Petersburg received SMS warnings about a drone attack in the Leningrad region. This was the first time, and frankly, it's obvious to anyone that the real reason for the cancellation is precisely the drone attack. Because, as we've discussed many times before, more than anything else in the world, Putin is afraid of dying.
However, on the 27th of July, Putin did arrive in St. Petersburg to inspect the Navy's July Storm operational exercises, which took place from the 23rd of July to 27th in the waters of the Arctic Ocean, the Pacific Ocean, the Baltic Sea, and the Caspian Sea.
The main goal of the exercises is to thoroughly practice the actions of fleet units and formations in repelling a seaborne attack under conditions as close to combat as possible. The coordination of ship crews, naval aviation combat teams, and coastal missile complexes is being tested. Our key objective is to reliably ensure Russia's security.
That's interesting, but we need to ensure security from whom exactly?
When Leonid Brezhnev, General Secretary of the CPSU Central Committee, signed the Helsinki Accords on Security, that was the creation of a security system in Europe. And in fact, Putin destroyed all of that by attacking Ukraine. And of course, now, as he parades around Europe with his tanks, submarines, and so on, he tells us that Russia needs to be protected from someone. Of course it does. Russia needs to be isolated from Putin, and then there will be security.
Well, of course. And what would it be without a festival of vanity? Navy Day in Russia could not go by without the country's chief sailor. Putin was awarded the Medal for Loyalty to the Navy.
For being awarded the Medal of the Maritime Board of the Russian Federation for loyalty to the Russian Navy, for his significant personal contribution to the development of the Russian Navy, strengthening the country's maritime power and maintaining strategic and regional stability in the world's oceans, the Medal for loyalty to the Russian Navy is awarded to the President of the Russian Federation, Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin.
The medal was presented by Putin's aide and the chairman of the Maritime Board. Most likely, it was Putin himself who approved it. After all, who else would be worthy of such an honor, if not him?
For Putin, well, it's the same old story of imitation, yes. So when they canceled Navy Day, not the day itself, but the parade on Navy Day, they're still afraid to cancel the day itself. For now, basically, the very parade they created for themselves, and now they're forced to cancel it themselves. And now they have to put on some kind of imitation. But apparently, to complete the picture of imitation, they had to pin some medals on him as the sailor's greatest friend.
And so that people wouldn't be too upset about the cancellation of such a grand parade, Putin even went out among the public.
Personally, I truly believe that this entire story is completely and utterly staged, appearing to be entirely fabricated. And the audience was specially trained and gathered in a particular way. And the fact that we don't see any security in the television footage just means that somewhere far away, out of our sight, there's a cordon, and only the audience that was vetted was allowed near Putin. That's how I see it.
The parade was cancelled, the medal was awarded, people watched. Everything else doesn't matter. Navy Day was a success. Well, of course, by Kremlin standards.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
Putin has been cornered. Trump gave the bunker dweller just 10 days. The Kremlin is in a panic. The clock is ticking. Lavrov has a meltdown live on air. Peskov is in tears. Medvedev on a bender threatens with nukes. And Putin came out to face the people. Watch all the shocking details right now.
The countdown has begun. US President Trump has issued a new ultimatum to the Kremlin.
I will set a new deadline about 10 or 12 days. There is no reason to wait. It was 50 days. I wanted to be generous, but we just don't see any progress.
The American leader also emphasized that he is no longer interested in talking to the Kremlin dictator Putin.
I'm not really interested in talking anymore. We used to have such pleasant conversations, such respectful and good conversations, and then the next night, people die from rockets flying into cities.
Trump sets deadlines instantly and single-handedly. And by doing this, he shows that he supposedly controls the situation, and he directs Putin toward a certain period of decisions, a certain format of decisions. Nevertheless, this actually indicates that Trump clearly understands that Putin is not going to pursue a real peaceful settlement, but rather a fake and imitative one, as he's demonstrating now.
If Russia refuses to sign a peace agreement with Ukraine, the United States may impose secondary sanctions against Moscow.
Obviously, the United States toolkit is threefold. First, it's the provision of enhanced military aid to Ukraine. Second, it's the imposition of secondary sanctions against countries, companies, and economic entities that allow themselves to circumvent sanctions. These are primarily the United Arab Emirates, Turkey, China, India, Kazakhstan, and potentially an embargo on Russian goods.
Such news simply drove Dmitry Medvedev into a frenzy, and he began threatening the United States with war.
Trump is playing a game of ultimatum with Russia, 50 days or 10. He should remember two things. Russia is not Israel and not even Iran. Every new ultimatum is a threat and a step toward war. Not between Russia and Ukraine, but with his own country. Don't repeat Sleepy Joe's path.
Medvedev is deliberately released into the public space solely and exclusively to set some kind of specific media agenda. But the real reaction there, Russia's real response from official circles of the Russian Federation is shaped based on Putin's line of conduct. This has absolutely nothing to do with what Medvedev says or thinks. It's just a way to play around with the media agenda.
Loud statements were also made by horsehead Lavrov. He stated that Russia has a complete lack of allies. Well, who would doubt Eve claims his country is fighting alone against the entire West?
Lavrov's essential task, working closely together with Zakharova, is to meticulously create some kind of comprehensive informational picture, and through his consistently unprofessional actions to fully accompany the general Kremlin line.
Meanwhile, while Putin's servants are playing to the audience, Azerbaijan has started supplying gas to Ukraine. We're talking about small volumes, but as noted in the oil and gas sector, this is a strategic step toward expanding cooperation.
It was difficult for Ukrainian diplomacy to break through the barrier in Ukrainian-Azerbaijani relations that had formed during Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. And it's clear that Azerbaijan, with its foreign policy approach, is focused on balancing, and understandably for a long time did not want to have any conflicts or misunderstandings with the Russian Federation. But the situation with the deaths of passengers on the Azal airline flight and the tensions in relations to the repressions against Azerbaijani citizens in Yashihar undoubtedly changed the Azerbaijani leadership's perception of Russia's true attitude toward Baku.
And finally, a shocking piece of news. The Kremlin dictator appeared before the people. On Sunday in St. Petersburg, Putin stopped his limousine and went out to meet Russians on the streets. This happened for the first time since October of last year.
We all fully understand that this is a very meticulously well-staged theatrical event involving a truly huge number of security service agents who diligently ensure both the utmost security and the precisely desired behavior of the people present, as well as carefully planted individuals who convincingly pretend to be ordinary Russian citizens, supposedly genuinely overjoyed and ecstatically thrilled at meeting the revered Tsar in quotes, of course. So here it is, a typical PR strategy.
Well, Putin's next appearance among the people should probably be expected in a year.
Shock. America is withdrawing troops from Europe. Ramstein under threat. Germany without US soldiers. Now it's every man for himself. A global reassessment of forces has begun. Russia is waiting. All the shocking details watch right now.
In the near future, the US may withdraw a third of its military contingent from Europe A report on the US military presence in the world and in the old world will be published by the end of August. This is reported by Politico. For decades, the US military presence in Germany has been the foundation of Europe's global security. But now Washington wants to reconsider the deployment locations of its troops. For Germany, US military support has long been the cornerstone of national security from the Cold War era to the present day. Facing ongoing issues with its own capabilities from ammunition and combat readiness to strategic deterrence, Berlin continues to rely heavily on American forces. This includes American nuclear warheads stationed in the western city of Büchel, which are a key element of NATO's overall defensive strategy against threats such as Russia. Germany currently hosts the largest contingent of American military personnel in Europe, about 35,000. This also includes Ramstein Air Basea Central Hub for Air Operations and Satellite Communications, Grafenwörth largest training ground, as well as a key headquarters for military personnel. As a result of the review of troop numbers, around 20,000 American military personnel may be withdrawn. These are the troops who were sent to Europe in 2022 under President Joe Biden after the start of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. I started saying 2 years ago that at some point it would become clear that the Americans would eventually be doing less. For now, we Europeans can count on them to do more. But we have to acknowledge that they have their own interests in the Indo-Pacific region in ensuring the security of maritime trade routes.
First of all, it's about saving money because he's always looking for ways to cut costs. After all, maintaining an armed force of about 100,000 people in Europe with European prices for everything is expensive. A significant portion of them are in Germany where, let's be honest, prices aren't exactly low. So there's definitely an element of cost saving here. The second point, which is probably even more important, is that he says Europe should take care of its own security. It's time for us to stop protecting Europe, especially since they're not even paying the required percentage of their gross national product for defense, yet we're still protecting them.
Currently, there are about 100,000 American soldiers stationed in Europe. They could withdraw at least a third of that contingent. Europe should defend itself. That's what Trump is saying. He's also the one making decisions about troop redeployment. Europe is already gradually starting to allocate more money for its own defense. In 2025, Berlin allocated 86 billion euros for defense, which amounts to 2.4% of GDP. By 2029, annual defense spending is expected to reach 153 billion euros, or 3.5% of GDP, which will be the most ambitious rearmament project in the country since reunification. But if the US withdraws part of its troops from the old world in a short period of time, Europe simply won't be ready for it.
In some ways, on the contrary, this could even play a positive role for Europe. If America starts to withdraw, its military presence will be reduced or completely eliminated. But on the other hand, this will be a signal to Russia as well, saying, look, America no longer protects Europe. Europe is on its own. And without American armed forces at the moment, European armed forces are still weaker.
Europe must realize and be prepared for the fact that the US has its own interests, for example, in the Indo-Pacific region, ensuring the security of maritime trade routes. So the withdrawal of a third of the American contingent is quite realistic. Before the beginning of September, the White House will likely announce this.
China is devouring Russia. Military technology in exchange for cannon fodder. A new round of war is coming. August will be decisive. What is really behind the alliance between Putin and Kim Jong-un?
The alliance of two dictators, Kim Jong-un and Vladimir Putin, is developing. Russia and North Korea have opened direct air service, demonstrating further rapprochement between the two countries. On the 27th of July, the first direct flight from Moscow airport departed for Pyongyang, the capital of North Korea. This became a demonstration of strengthening ties between Russia and the isolated communist state. It is known that the flight is operated by the Russian airline Northwind, and such flights will be carried out at least once a month.
It's not exactly a logistical breakthrough or some kind of major surge in communication. Rather, it's quite a symbolic gesture. Really, it's just for show, a display for the world. Look, we're cooperating so closely that we're even establishing flights. in other words, regular air service. North Korea is showing in this way. Look, we are not isolated. We have a big northern neighbor, a big northern friend. That's it. Russia is also showing, look, we have a reliable partner. From a practical standpoint, I think they'll just use this to transport whatever specialists they need for the military industry and so on. So this will be, let's say, flights for their own people.
Until now, flights to Pyongyang were only operated from Vladivostok. Also, in June, a direct railway connection was launched between Moscow and Pyongyang. The travel time is 9 days. Cooperation between the two countries has significantly intensified after the signing last year of a military agreement to expand their strategic partnership amid increased international sanctions.
One way or another, in the West, Putin is still seen as a leader of a world power who must be reckoned with, negotiated with, and so on. Well, essentially, yes. All that unites the North Korean and Russian regimes is that they are both quite isolated from the rest of the world, focused exclusively on war and a militarized economy, and because of this, they have quite a few common points, let's say points of contact.
Since the start of the full-scale invasion, visits by delegations from both countries have become quite frequent. For example, in July, Lavrov went to Pyongyang, and a month earlier, the chairman of the Russian Security Council and former Minister of Defense, Sergei Shoigu, met with Kim Jong-un. Such support from Russia not only strengthens North Korea's military capabilities, but also helps reinforce the regime of the North Korean dictator.
North Korea is a closed-off totalitarian state, isolated from the rest of the world, with a completely hostile ideology. They constantly threaten their neighbors, primarily South Korea and Japan. They suddenly launch missile strikes into the sea near Japan, making threats. But it's clear that as long as North Korea exists on its own, it's unlikely they have the resources to develop truly serious weapons for such threats. Although they do have nuclear weapons. But thanks to cooperation with Russia, they gain a whole range of advantages. That is, they are already gaining access to Russian technology.
The Kremlin, in turn, has received the unconditional support of the North Korean leader. Pyongyang is sending containers with weapons as well as manpower to Russia.
The entire North Korean military industry is working for Russia, and thanks to this, Russia receives a constant supply of the necessary weapons. And simply manpower as well. In other words, the Russians have already used North Korean soldiers in specific instances and plan to expand this use in the future. So, in this way, Putin is simply buying manpower for money, and thus he can continue to recruit essentially mercenaries within his own country without resorting to a general mobilization, which he clearly does not want.
Earlier, Shoigu also reported that in 2025, visits to North Korea by high-ranking Russian officials are planned. For example, in August, to mark the 80th anniversary of Korea's liberation, State Duma Chairman Vyacheslav Volodin will arrive in Pyongyang, and in October, Dmitry Medvedev is planning a visit.
That's all for now, and for more breaking news and important updates from the front, be sure to tune in to the very next episode.